Hello, and welcome to the Where People Meet podcast, the event technology podcast series for the global meetings and events industry. I'm your host, Mitch Malinsky, head of strategic partnerships here at Feedloop in beautiful Toronto, Canada. And today I'm joined by the wonderful Tika Woolley, Senior Manager of Shows and Events at SalonCentric of L'Oreal USA. An accomplished leader in the industry with a long list of awards and achievements under her belt, Tika takes a particular interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DE&I, and how to promote DE&I at events. Tika, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mitch. Excited to be here.
Of course. So let's start with you telling the audience a bit about yourself and your background in the meetings and events industry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I have been in the meetings and events industry for over a decade. Ironically enough, I actually started in the music business. That's where I got my degree and envisioned myself being within that industry long term. And looking back on the journey, it all makes sense in that I was an EA to an A&R. And for those that don't know, in the music business, that's artist and repertoire. And so that time in that season in my life gave me the opportunity to work with high profile artists, plan niche experiences for tours, for meet and greets, and really elevate dining experiences for specific markets. So when I transitioned into doing events for the beauty world, it was a natural transition because although I didn't have it be a title per se, it was a big part of my day to day. So that's the beginnings. Looking back, it's like it was all meant to be, of course. And so lucky enough, I really progressed in this industry by starting off doing the niche boutique events for a high-end professional hair company. At the time, it was Mizani, which happens to be a brand that's focused more so on highly coily textured hair. And so, getting that understanding of what an elevated event is and really submerging myself in that market and showing up differently and bringing awareness, that was the beginnings. And then as I transitioned over the last decade, it became about, working with larger scale brands and, anywhere upwards from an event standpoint from 10,000
Wow.
to 30,000. Yeah. So very different. And then, transitioning to leading teams and working cross-functionally with so many wonderful vendors. And at this point in my career right now, I am working on the distribution side of the beauty industry. So I have the amazing day-to-day opportunity to work within the brands itself, but then also work with partner brands and brainstorming and showing up differently and seeing how we could make sure to take that in-person and digital experience and make it so that it has a lasting impact, right, on the guests. So it's just been an amazing journey.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Very interesting to hear about you getting started off in the music industry as well, because I do, of course, see a lot of overlap between that and then the natural shift to the role of an event planner. But at this point, it seems you're a pretty popular name in the industry. So congrats on all of your achievements so far.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yes, it's one creative industry to the next.
Fantastic. So when I was diving into your online profile, I was really impressed with your resume and particularly with L'Oreal. I see you've risen up the ranks, going from event coordinator to now director, manager of events. So what have you learned about the world of events over your 13 years at the company? And what tips do you have for new event planners starting out in the industry?
Yeah. So the event world is an ever evolving and changing world. And so the biggest thing I've learned is that you have to stay open-minded to change, open-minded to showing up differently. The last decade has seen the rise of, hybrid being the way all the time. I wouldn't say it's the way of the future, it is the way of now. and having a digital component and ensuring that you have data, because data is king to ensure that, you're touching base with that clientele or that guest with every experience that you plan. So that's been, for me, the biggest learning is never stay where you are. Um, always continue to learn, innovate, push envelope, take calculated risk. I can't tell you enough how many times I've fallen down, but it's been the biggest learnings that we've had because of it. And many of those risks has been the one thing that brings about the most ROI, right? So taking a risk and having more people come to you, whether it's an installation that's inspired by travel or inspired by restaurant. I got inspired by a pastry chef once, and I was able to contact the pastry chef and see kind of his mindset and how he worked. And we were able to take what he did at his restaurant and bring it to life on the road, where we took, in the beauty industry, it's something called NAHA, which is like the Grammys of the beauty industry, Mitch. And essentially we took key looks, hair looks, and recreated it with cotton candy. And that was just like a game changer for us in the market. And then, of course, we gave out cotton candy as well. But more importantly, people came, they asked questions, they signed up. And so we were able to continue having that relationship with that clientele way after that year of going on tour with that installation. So stay open-minded, travel, soak it in, bring it to, whatever event you're planning.
That's amazing. And it seems one of the reasons you've been so successful in your career is you are willing to go beyond traditional events and you're willing to look elsewhere for inspiration. And I think that's incredibly important for an event planner or really anyone in any role at a company. So that's fantastic to hear, Tika. And just one item before we move on to our next topic here that sparked my interest is you mentioned hybrid events. Sure, they're the way of the future, but they're also now. And for me, as an event technologist representing an event tech company, I completely agree with you. Curious, was that your vision pre-pandemic as well? Was L'Oreal doing hybrid events pre-pandemic, or was that really just kickstarted due to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, it definitely accelerated with COVID-19 pandemic. So we did play in the space of hybrid events before, but it wasn't the status quo. So it wasn't at every event, and it was limited live streaming opportunities. Whereas, as we're transitioning out of this pandemic period, it's just a part of doing the business. So it's a part of the planning process from conception.
Yep.
And so, before it was like, okay, we can do this too, so that people can play back and see it. And, even so, we weren't even looking at it at that time as this gives more accessibility to those who cannot physically be there for whatever reason, right? And so it just opened up the doors and the outreach to, people who are, maybe navigating through some disabilities that are not as seen, yes. Or if it is something that's more physical and they're just not comfortable to go right back out, it gives them the opportunity to experience it from home. So it's been a game changer for sure. So to answer your question, it was a part of it. It just wasn't a part of every event that we planned.
Right. And we saw that with a lot of our clients as well. Pre-pandemic, Feetloop, as an event technology company, we did offer hybrid event solutions, but at that time it was very, very basic and not widely adopted. Whereas the pandemic rapidly accelerated that, virtual became the new norm. And now going forward, planning an event without a virtual component, you can't even do that. So completely agree.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on to a topic I know you're very passionate about, and I'm really interested to learn more, is DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this is one mission that you've been promoting at the events you organize. Can you tell us more about what DE&I means to you and how you make this part of an event's mission?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for me, D&I, the goal is to make it just, par for the course, right? It should just be a part of everything that we're doing. Inclusivity and belonging needs to be woven into every part of the event experience. Um, Personally, Mitch, I'll tell you, I've been in many spaces where I have been the only one that looks like me. And whether it's back of house, from a planning perspective, a boardroom perspective, C-suite perspective, there's not many that look like me there to give that voice and that perspective.
Okay.
And then moving in front of house, whether it's guest speakers or facilitators that we have, or even vendors that we use, supplier diversity, it was far and few between. And so it's been a passion and a mission of mine to ensure that when selecting partnerships and selecting guest speakers and, hiring even on our team, to make sure that we have various backgrounds, because at the end of the day, diversity brings about the best experience for all, right? So whether it's culturally, whether it's their journey from any disability that they have, bringing that perspective to the plate, and not just talking about it, not just having it to check off a box, Mitch. I mean, really allowing that voice to shake things up, shake that table. You get the seat, but then you shake it when you get there. You shake that table, and you do things differently, right? There's things that I don't see. Everybody has unconscious habits, right? Just because we've been doing things for so long in one way, it's natural to maybe not see it from a different perspective. So having various backgrounds around you is essential. So it's for me, it's a must. You should have that lens from the pre-planning process all the way to post-event, when you're following up with any of the guests that were leaning into your experience, to make sure that they understand that they're seen and they're heard, and that they're invited for a reason, and that we appreciate them. Mm-hmm.
That's great. And at the end of the day, I think it will make the event itself stronger, better. It'll resonate better with people because, as we all know, diverse backgrounds, diverse teams, that really leads to the best end product possible.
Absolutely.
And so to quickly recap what you did mention there is you look at diversity across a number of elements for the event. In terms of the team itself, you look at diversity for hiring so that the organizers, you've got a wide range of experiences and backgrounds there, but also to the event programming. It seems when you're looking at speakers, you look to bring on a wide range of backgrounds, partnerships that you're looking to leverage at the event, all the way down to the tools you're utilizing, the vendors, the technology. How did those components help to promote diversity? So that's good to keep in mind for our audience. We'll be sure to highlight that afterwards as well.
Absolutely. Spot on, Mitch.
So, Tika, we briefly addressed this earlier on in the conversation, but over the past few years, we, of course, saw the rise of the virtual event format due to in-person events no longer being possible with the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, did this impact your strategy on diversity, equity, and inclusion at events? Were there any new tools that you can leverage? How did the virtual event format play into your goal of promoting this mission of D&I at your events?
So twofold. One, we were no longer limited by geography, right? So sometimes, when you're doing physical events, because of travel and expenses, sometimes you have to tap into the talent or the speakers within that market. Virtual changes all of that, right? So you have a huge portfolio of key speakers that you can speak and tap into, and you can have diverse backgrounds and perspectives more easily, is what I'll say. So that to us was a game changer because it was like, okay, now everyone's tuning in, and we can have people within the states or outside of the states, lean into this experience. So that was one, because that changed really. Um, uh, that changed the feel and the look of our events. And then, quite frankly, to be just transparent with you, it also, in the last 2 years, we had a lot of courageous conversations online, right? So we couldn't physically meet and have those and arrange those. And we were able to do that within our events digitally, which was super impactful and needed.
Yes.
The other bit to it, Mitch, is the accessibility piece. I know I touched on that before, but lots of learnings when it comes to digital with neurodiversity, right? So in the beginning, when we were doing this, there wasn't as much closed captioning. The platforms added that on after, so we were hiring out to get things live translated, or just closed captioned out. So when we do our events, we think about the bilingual opportunities. We think about the neurodiversity. So the closed captioning, but then also like the lighting and then the flow of the event, understanding that there's people that are on the spectrum that need those breaks. Not only that, they have to have the agenda well in advance, right? It just makes for a better experience. So through that, and quite frankly, through a lot of feedback that we got, we've been able to tweak it and make it better, shorten the day a bit, knowing that screen time can be exhausting. And so although it's a wonderful tool to have, we have to be mindful of everyone's positioning that's watching. So it has forced us to look at events completely different. And even when we're now back in person and we're doing hybrid, speaking to both audiences and, still making sure we have just the right amount of breaks, not only for the people in person, but for the people watching on screen. So,
Right.
yeah, it's made a more inclusive environment overall.
It really has. Although the transition from in-person to virtual was difficult and some event planners struggled with it, I think one of the amazing benefits of this whole pivot is accessibility and inclusion has come to the forefront. And for us as event technology companies, that's a differentiator that we can now leverage because we understand that clients are looking to support multi-language events. They're looking to support accessible events where the platform is accessible with screen reader capabilities, where the participant can come in and they have the ability to adjust the text size, background colors, all of those items. So making that pivot to virtual really brought accessibility to the forefront, especially when there are some organizations that look at accessibility guidelines like AODA, ADA, WCAG, and where they say, hey, sorry, we can't work with you unless you meet these certain standards, then I think that's a huge benefit for the industry. And we've done a lot of leveling up over the past few years. So I'm really happy to see that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and if I can just echo the last bit about leveling up, you hit it on the T, where it really has evolved in the last 2 years.
It's a
And so the
process.
offerings and yeah, exactly, even down to, from a 2D to a 3D format, the options
Yep.
of skin tone and, clothing, et cetera, to make everyone on the other side of the screen feel comfortable, right? And feel like, oh, okay, that's, I can relate to this one and I can select this one if I'm going through this experience in this kind of format. So it's been amazing to see the evolution over the last, year and a half or 2 years or so.
Completely agree. Well, I was really excited to bring you on board because I think this is a message that our audience will really resonate with, is how to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion at their events. So the last question I've got for you today, Tika, is what are your tips and tricks for event planners who are looking to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in their events? Is there anything specific they should keep in mind?
Well, first, an open mind and always willing to learn and listen. Leading with empathy with your events is going to be key, so that when you are planning that experience from beginning and end, you see everyone, or at minimum, Mitch, you have people around you, right, that can bring different perspectives. That way you can keep that in mind when planning. So, I will say this, if everyone in the room looks like you, that's a problem. And this goes to, when you are, curating that experience and selecting, whether it's in your world, whether it's artists or talent or guest speakers, you really have to look at who all the players are and say, why if they all look the same, why? Right? And start peeling the layers of, what can you do better? That way you get, a variety of options for people coming into the experience that you're creating. And so, like you said earlier, it makes for a better event. It makes for a better industry. So the biggest tip I can give is, when planning, think about it from all aspects. That pre-planning phase is so essential. Even when you're just brainstorming on what you would like it to look like, and then as you start editing it down, starting off with knowing, I would love to have this person from this background, and that, like, not only just their journey, but also looking at it like, do we have representation for the people that are coming in? Can they see themselves in the speakers? And so that's just key. And I really do believe the event industry as a whole, Mitch, is getting better and better with this. There's always opportunity, but we've gotten a lot better. And so it just needs to be part of the initial process, starting from the ideation, to be inclusive, and not just to do it as a checkbox, but to make sure that you're cultivating that belonging when you're planning your events.
Yeah, needs to be part of the vision, the overall strategy. And Tika, I think people like you who are out there in the industry talking about DE&I, promoting it everywhere you go, that's really going a long way in helping us to spread this wonderful message. So I got a lot out of this conversation. Just want to say thank you so much for being so generous with your time, sharing your insights with our audience and our listeners. But I'm sure many of them will want to learn more. So if people do want to get in touch with you to learn more about your work, how they can support or drive diversity, equity, and inclusion at their events, what's the best way for them to do so?
Well, one, I want to say thank you for having me. This is a great experience, and I love everything that you're doing. And I hope that through the podcast, we get more and more people who can maybe do things differently, right, Mitch? But if they want to keep up with anything that I'm doing, I am on LinkedIn, Tika Woolley, also Mish Tika. So I'm open. I accept everybody. I think it's a great platform to connect and grow. You never know who the next superstar in the event industry is, or who the next vendor you'll be partnering with. So they can catch me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, we'll get that spread around for you. But that wraps up our Where People Meet podcast episode on how to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion at events with the wonderful Tika Woolley. Thanks for your time today, and we'll see you next time on the Where People Meet podcast.
Thank you.